I hope you feel like you got your money's worth yesterday. We covered a lot of information. When I went back to the room, I got, man, we went through a lot of stuff. You know, that's hard to absorb that much stuff. I know that. It's very difficult to absorb that much information at one time. We covered about a day's and a half's worth yesterday, worth of information. It just flowed really well. I appreciate that. Your questions help keep me on track, and you guys did a very good job with that. This is a little thing I wanted to go over with you, and it has to do with the marriages we talked about yesterday, with the blueprint of a marriage. And this was derived from a conversation, an enlightening conversation with the Marriage License Bureau of Arizona. Okay? About 20 years ago, my former wife filed for divorce. We had 7 children, 5 daughters and 2 sons. Our youngest at the time, our second son, was 5 years old. At the time I prepared a counterclaim to the petition for dissolution her attorney filed in Domestic Relations Court. I met one afternoon with the head of the Maricopa County Superior Court Marriage License Bureau in downtown Phoenix. The Marriage License Bureau was headed by a young woman of about the age of 25. I asked her to explain to me the general and statutory implications of the marriage license. She was very cooperative and called in an assistant, a tall black man who at the time was working on an operations manual for internal departmental use. She deferred for most technical explanations to her assistant. He walked through the technicalities of the marriage license as it operates in Arizona. He mentioned that marriage licensing is pretty much the same in the other states, but there are a few slight differences here and there. One significant difference he mentioned was that Arizona was one of 8 western states that are community property states. The other states are common law states, including Utah, with the exception of Louisiana, which is a Napoleonic Code state. Yeah, they're under the Napoleonic Code. Louisiana, when I go down there and work on cases, it's a whole different thing.
I mean, I knew they were kind of their own country, but...
Pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah. He then explained some of the technicalities of the marriage license. He said, first of all, the marriage license is a secular contract between the parties and the state. The state is the principal party in the contract. The husband and wife are secondary or inferior parties. The secular contract is a 3-way contract between the state as principal and the husband and wife as the other 2 legs of the contract, just like the blueprint yesterday. He said in the traditional sense, a marriage is a covenant between the husband and wife and God. But in a secular contract with the state, reference to God is a dotted line and not officially considered included in the secular contract at all. Exactly like the blueprint of a marriage on the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Okay? He said, if the husband and wife wish to include God as a party in their marriage, that is a dotted line, they will have to add in their own minds the state's marriage license is strictly secular. He said further that what he meant by the relationship to God being a dotted line meant that the state regards any mention of God as irrelevant, even meaningless. In his description of the marriage license contract, the related one other dotted line, he said in a traditional religious context, marriage was a covenant between the husband and wife, and God with husband and wife joined as one. This is accomplished with a recording in a family Bible with 3 witnesses. Where do you think I came up with this stuff, right? I don't just invent things, okay? I research, I find it, I figure it out, and then I present it. This is not the case in the secular realm of the state's marriage license contract. The state is the principal or dominant party. The husband and wife are merely contractually joined as business partners, not in any religious union. Okay? They may even be considered, he said, connected to each other just by a dotted line. The picture he was trying to paint was that of a triangle with the state at the top and a solid line extending from the apex. The state down the left. I didn't even find on the United States Patent and Trademark Office website the patent of a marriage until long after this, years after this. He was describing it to a T, and then I found it and I go, oh my gosh, here it is. It's patented. It's a patented process. Just drives me crazy. Okay. The dotted line merely showing that they consider themselves to have entered into a religious union of some sort is irrelevant to the state. Marriage license secular contract diagram. State is primary in the party. The husband and wife is secondary in the party. He further mentions that this religious overtone is recognized by the state by requiring that the marriage must be solemnized either by a state official or by a minister of religion that has been deputized by the state. That's why the preacher has to get licensed by the state to perform a marriage. He's deputized by the state, which makes him an agent, right? Well, go ask your bishop if you can get married in the temple without a state license. Tell me what he says.
No, the answer is no.
I know that. Okay, that's because they've commercialized. Goes back to the attorney running the church. Okay? So the minister of religion that has been deputized by the state to perform the marriage ceremony and make a return of the signed and executed marriage license back to the state. So it's his responsibility to return it signed by him as agent. Again, he emphasized that marriage is a strictly secular relationship so far as the state is concerned, and because it is looked upon as a privileged business enterprise. So you just go into business with your wife when you marry her with a state, right? Yeah. Various tax advantages and other political privileges have become attached to the marriage license contract that have nothing at all to do with the marriage as a religious covenant or a bond between God and a man or a woman. By way of reference, if you would like to read a legal treatise on marriage, one of the best is a book called Principles of Community Property by William D. Funiak. At the outset, he explains the community property law descends from the Roman civil law through the Spanish codes dating as far back as 600 AD, written by the Spanish jurisconsulates. In the civil law, the marriage is considered to be a for-profit venture or a profit-making venture, even though it may never actually produce a profit in operation. And as the wife goes out to the local market to purchase foodstuffs and other supplies for the marriage household, she is replenishing the stocks of the business and or its inventory. To restate, in the civil law, the marriage is considered to be a business venture. Moreover, as children come into the marriage household, the business venture is considered to have borne fruit. Now back to the explanation by the Maricopa County Superior Court Marriage Bureau's administrative assistants. He went on to explain that every contract must have consideration. The state offers consideration in the form of the actual license itself, the piece of paper, the certificate of marriage, The other part of the consideration by the state is the privilege to be regulated by your statutes,
That's such a privilege.
Regulated by your statute,
by their statutes. Yeah.
just through being married.
Isn't that a privilege? Once you change your status, you can rescind your contracts. I actually have a document that I used for myself to annul the state of Nevada, because that's where I got married. So I took the state out of the contract. He added that this privilege to be regulated by statute includes all related statutes and all court cases as they are ruled on by the courts, and all statutes and regulations into the future in the years following the commencement of the marriage. He said, in a way, the marriage license contract is dynamic or flexible. What did we talk about the word dynamic means yesterday in the law? To keep moving, just keep moving. So it's flexible, it keeps moving. Ever-changing contract as time goes along, even though the husband and wife doesn't realize that. My thought on this is that it can really be considered a true contract as one becomes aware of the failure by the state to make full disclosure of the terms and conditions. But remember, in court, presumption and assumptions so must be repudiated in all aspects or you give over jurisdiction. A contract must be entered into knowingly, intelligently, intentionally, and with full informed consent. Otherwise, technically, there is no contract. But you go try telling the court that when you're a citizen, right? They could care less. The marriage license contract with the state is a contract of adhesion, a contract between two disparate, unequal parties. Again, a flawed contract. Such a contract with the state is said to be a specific performance contract as to the privileges, duties, and responsibilities that are attached. Consideration on the part of the husband and wife is the fee paid for the application and the implied agreement to be subject to the state statutes, rules, and regulations in all court cases ruled on regulated to marriage law, family law, children, and property. So the minute you fill out the application and pay the fee, you just bound yourself to the state statutes, rules, regulations, all court cases relating to marriage law, family law, children, and property.
Which essentially took all your rights away.
Yeah. Yeah, they took away your unalienable rights and gave you privileges and bound you to their contract just by going down and paying the fee and filling out the application and getting married. When you could have took the family Bible, you could buy at Deseret Industries for $40, recorded on the first few pages, take a scanned copy of it, write a little affidavit, and go record it on the county recorder's office, and you're just as legally married. But now, not with the state, but with you, your wife, and God. That's the proper way to get married. That's the way we got married for hundreds of years before this whole system of fraud came into effect.
You're stuck.
Now, you know, you really need to annul the state for the fraud that they committed, for the cause of fraud and swindle, no full and honest disclosure, right? And then get married the right way in the Bible, go record it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go back in like Family Search or Ancestry.com or one of the other genealogy programs, and you go back and you search records like 1600s, 1700s, you'll see everybody recorded it with the church in the family in the Bibles of the church records, and then it was recorded. And you can pull up those recordings even today from 1620.
So how would you do like the ceremony or whatever? Do you have somebody marry you, or can you just exchange vows, or like how does it work?
You can do it however you want to do it. It's between you and your husband and God. Make the decision. Get on your knees and pray about it. There's no set way.
Just people fall into a pattern.
You record the event. in the Bible. You get some witnesses who attended, who were there. They could be family members, and then just go record it. But do it in a little one-page affidavit, just agreeing on the event in the affidavit. Go get it notarized, attach it to the photo scan picture of the Bible where you recorded it. The Bible is the law. It's Public Law 97-280, passed by Congress, that the Bible, the Word of God, this country was founded on Christian principles, and it is law. Congress declared the Bible, passed in 1982. Took them that long. In fact, 1983 was declared the year of the Bible. Okay? Had a presidential declaration that 1983 was the year of the Bible. So.
And then the temple marriage stands. There's nothing you have to do with that, correct? Because you're rescinding.
Take that up with your bishop. Because these guys are run by attorneys now. They have been corrupted. Joseph Smith even said they were going to be.
Yes.
They are. And they're run by attorneys. Attorneys control this world, and we have to stop that. This is who we're at war with, is the Bar Association. Okay? I don't know. I don't think Council of the 12 is voted on by the people of the church. There's no vote there by the people. If there was, you could say, wait a minute, what does he do for a living? He's a bar member? We ain't voting him in. But you have no say in it. Look, children are yours. They're your gift from God. They're your responsibility. I don't care if you don't change your status. God gives you the ultimate right. Okay, remember I said God's laws are superior. Constitutions and treaties are supreme. Everything else is corporate bylaws, or as I like to call it, SMU. Yeah. Even our prophet in DNC 98 said, it cometh of evil. I mean, are you righteous or not? Go obey all those statutes they tell you to, and then tell me if you're righteous about it. No. You're taking away someone by your obeyance. You're taking away your own and everyone else's freedom. You get that? You're actually contributing as a society to deprive people of their rights and their freedom when you obey the statutes. Now, am I telling you to go out there and break the law and get tickets and write on them your offer to contracts not accepted? Yes, a little bit. I am. But you got to know how to do it, see? Otherwise, I don't want you in jail. I don't want cops kicking the crap out of you like they do most people and knocking them down on the pavement. Kneel on their neck. Okay?
Or shoot them.
What I'm telling you is be nice about it. Educate everybody. And then let's just start saying, wait a minute, legislature, this statute does not fall in line with the Constitution, therefore it is null and void, and we, the people, will ignore it with impunity. Okay, in this regard, children born to the contract regarded as the contract-bearing fruit, he said it is virtually important for parents to understand two doctrines that became established in the United States during the 1930s. The first of these doctrines is parens patriae. The second doctrine is in loco parentis. You know what in loco parentis means? Crazy parenting. Crazy parenting. That's what it means. And that's a doctrine in our law, where the state is the parent and it's crazy parenting. Parens patriae means literally the parent of the country, or to state it more bluntly, the state is the undisclosed true parent of the child.
Isn't that a basis of communism?
What's that?
Yes.
The foundation of communism?
Well, of course it is.
Communism, fascism.
Yeah, start with Abe Lincoln. He was a follower of Karl Marx. Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848. Okay, start looking at Lincoln's first 5 runs as president when he tried to be president. He failed 5 times before he finally became president on his 6th, and it might be, I don't remember, I thought it was 5 and then 6th time he became president. But it wasn't until the big bankers of Boston, New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia got behind him, and they put $7 million into his campaign. $7 million in 1850. Oh, our presidential campaigns now are in the billions of dollars. Okay? $7 million in 1850 was a lot of money. Do you know how much his opponent had? 5,000. You listen to my dang videos. $5,000. So Lincoln's name was hanging on signs from every railroad car, every bridge, across roadways. He just plastered the nation at that time, which wasn't nearly as big as it is now, but he plastered his name on everything, and people finally voted for him. But if you go back to his early runs as presidency, and you look at letters and journals of people who lived during the time, they talk about him helping to pass communistic laws in the state of Illinois, which is where he was from. And they didn't want the communist son of a buck as president. And it said that in a lot of letters that people wrote. They did not want him as president of the United States. But what are we taught in our history books? Honest Abe, cannot tell a lie. Little kids getting up on stage in primary school 7 years ago. They do the whole Abe thing. It's all about freedom of slavery. I got a letter that President Lincoln wrote in my PowerPoint presentation that says he would never have freed the slaves had it been up to him.
In point, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves in the place they were slaves.
Right. Right. Had he not been shot, he might have accomplished more things, which then we would now be able to blame him for it, you know. But it took presidents after him, lots of them, all the way between him in 1861 through 63 and 1933. It took a whole bunch of things happening, little acts of Congress, little things happening, laws being passed, that created this whole system of fraud. And it all happened in that period of time. Now we added to it in 1945 in December, and we added to it in 1947 again, and we added to it in 1975 again, and so on and so forth. We made it worse. But during that period of time, that's where most of this crap happened. Think about your grandfathers living during that period of time. They'd write something in the newspaper in New York City, and 2 months later read it in San Francisco. By then it had already taken place. How do they object to something that was printed in the newspaper and then already done within 30 days, when it's 30 days later by the time they even know about it? And we were spreading west. We were spreading thin all over this country. And so our grandfathers didn't have what I call much ability to rebut, if any. And so what did they do? Power breeds power and corruption. And so they just added to things and gained power at an incredibly fast rate. And now, since then, we had World War II, we've had Korea, Grenada, Panama, Iraq, war after war after war after war after war, Vietnam, all of them. All these wars, besides World War II, United Nations authorized conflicts. Who the heck's got the time to rebut all this stuff? Well, now it's time. This is what I'm trying to do is wake up a nation, and you guys all go, let's handle it together, right? I really want to check with the State Department again and see how many of us there are, but I did get a little notice last month that said the numbers in the last couple of months, the last quarter, was huge. The amount of people that are rejecting their citizenship is huge.
And is the basis of the U.S. jumping from the UN and being sovereign, is that based on the percentage of U.S. nationals?
Well, it certainly helps because we're declaring that we have rights, that we control government. The more we show President, he gets those reports. Mike Pompeo at the State Department meets with the president. He gives them those reports and says, hey, look, last quarter, 40,000 people jumped ship. Maybe we ought to do something about this. President Trump's going, yes, he is. See, he knows.
So, just a question, do you know if all the states, I can't imagine somebody saying, hey, let's organize our state and make it so that we own everybody, all the children, that we own them, that they're the ward of the state. Is there any state that just kind of rebelled against that? Or?
Well, let me talk about a couple of states. Alabama, through the 10th Amendment Society, because of me talking in front of the 10th Amendment Society and talking about this right here, they took it to their legislature and ran with it. I didn't have any part of that other than giving the initial, fuel to the fire. And they took it and ran with it. Now Alabama doesn't issue state marriage licenses. They say record it in a Bible, bring it to the probate judge at the courthouse. He'll take care of it. He'll get it recorded on the land. He'll sign off on it. So you just submit it. He signs off of it. It gets recorded with the county.
That's all you need is a signature, or do you need the seal as well, or something?
Well, I don't know. They went through their own legislature and passed the law with the process of how they're wanting to do it. And it doesn't involve a state marriage license. Okay? Oklahoma. Look at what the Indians just did in Oklahoma. Did you hear about that?
No.
Oh, yeah,
They just took back a whole ton of land.
Yeah.
More than half the state of Oklahoma is an Indian reservation now. More than half. And on the other half that isn't, no police officer has any authority over a Native American. See, the problem was these Indians were going off the reservation, going into town and getting drunk, causing problems, and the sheriffs were beating the out of them and keeping them in jail with no due process of law. I got one Indian friend who has been fighting the state of Oklahoma for a long, long time, 3-4 years, legally, and he keeps winning. He just keeps winning. He goes in town, he gets beat up, sues them, and he wins. And he's been doing that over and over again. Now they can't even touch him. They have to refer him to the tribal police, right? So, no, man, those sheriffs down there were treating those guys like crap. Not only that, what's even worse is the Child Protective Services stealing the Indian children. So, did you ever watch the movie Wind River? I suggest you watch it, look at the end credits and what it says at the very end of that movie. Because they've had no system to determine how many Indian children and young women and even young men who have gone missing. Okay, parens patriae literally means the parent of the country. This means the parents may raise their children and maintain custody of their children as long as they don't offend the state. But if they in some manner displease the state can step in at any time and exercise its superior status and take custody and control of its children. The parents are only conditional caretakers. Thus the doctrine of in loco parentis. How does that make you feel? Yeah, the mother's the tug. Tugs a baby out to sea and it's presumed dead and lost after its soul plate has been taken. Until it comes back and claims its minor estate, or until you stand up and fight. Okay, he also added a few more technical details. The marriage license is an ongoing contractual relationship with the state. Technically, the marriage license is a business license allowing the husband and wife, in the name of the marriage, to enter into contracts with third parties and contract for mortgages and debts. They can get car loans, home mortgages, and installment debts in the name of the marriage because it is not only a secular enterprise, but is looked upon by the state as a privileged business enterprise as well as a for-profit business enterprise. The marriage contract acquires property throughout its existence, and over time, it is hoped that it increases in value. This goes to legal term limited conditional title or lease, the right to make a profit or to incur a loss. I say that in all my videos. To make a profit or incur a loss. That's what you have the right to do in your marriage. Now, a lot of times you just go on dates, you like her, you should just write a check and buy her a house. Because that happens. All right, it's a business. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. Not really. So at the end of this 1 hour long meeting, I somewhat humorously asked if other people had come in and asked the question I was asking. Has anybody else came in and asked the questions that I was asking? The assistant replied that in the many years that he had worked there, he was not aware of anyone else asking these questions. He added that he was very glad to see someone interested in the legal implications of the marriage license and the contractual relationship it creates with the state. That's the problem. We're just kind of grow up, going along, believing, and taught to comply, to not stand up and question anyone. We're just told, hey, this is how you do it. Go apply for a marriage license. Go right down here. You know, get married in a church or justice of the peace or whatever, but you got to get that state marriage license to do it. Get married in the temple, but you got to get that state license to do it. And so we just run down to get that state license. We pay the fee and we go about our lives thinking we're free. But what did we just legally do to ourselves? We shackled ourselves.
Can we get a copy then?
Sure. His boss, the young woman, Marriage Bureau Department head, stated, if you have to understand that people who come in here to get a marriage license are in heat. The last thing they want to know is technical, legal, and statutory implications of the marriage license. I hope this is helpful information to anyone interested in getting more familiar with the contractual implications of the marriage license. The marriage license, as we know it, didn't come into existence until after the Civil War, and it didn't become standard practice in all the states until after 1900, becoming firmly established by 1920. In effect, the states or governments appropriated or usurped the control of marriages in secular form, and in the process declared common law application to marriages abrogated. Look, if you write down the event, the time, the date, the place, who the parties are, and I would call them a mate and a helpmate, as it does in the Bible. Australians at least got that part right. That took you guys just a little long. Must be Sunday morning. Yeah, write them down as a mate and a helpmate, not a husband and wife. A mate and a helpmate. That's what we really are to each other. Record the event. Get the names down. Get it recorded. Who officiated it? And a couple of witnesses that showed up at your marriage, at your wedding. Put that down in the Bible. Take a photograph of it so it's scanned in nice. Print it off. Do a one-page affidavit and go record it. And it's every bit as legal. Didn't cost you much more, or probably less. A good family Bible is about $40 at DI, right? And those are the ones with the extra pages in the front and the back, so you can record your children's births, probates, deaths, everybody in your family. You can record it there. Any Christian Bible. See, this is the thing. Congress declared the 1611 King James Version of the Bible as the Word of God. That doesn't mean any subsequent printings aren't as well. However, if you look at a lot of these new Bibles, man has corrupted them so badly it's not even funny. I always go back to the 1611 version. I've got it on my iPad. I've got it on my phone. Download the app. In fact, you can download the app with all the Maccabees and the additional books that we took out of the basement of the Vatican about that was about 1994. We took those out of the basement of the Vatican.
I have a question about adoption. So we originally got married, not really for getting married, but because he was going to adopt my older son, and we still haven't gotten through that process. But is there a way, because we wanted to...
The only reason in our process today that you adopt through the state is so that you can declare the fruit. See, it's like if I take apples from Oregon and I drive into California with a box of apples in my back seat, they stop me at the border and ask if I got any fruit to declare. That's all you're doing is declaring your fruit without adoption with the state.
So that they can now attach you.
In reality, see, you're talking about your child and him adopting him, okay? You write a contract with each other. Put it in the Bible. Record the event. Go record it.
What about...
Do an affidavit claiming, I am the father. Okay?
Does my son's biological father have to...
And then tell the state. Yeah,
I guess he would have to...
I'm serious. Who are they anyway? A corporation located in Washington, D.C.?
Mr. Straight, when a child is in public school, does that mean that they're in public schools jurisdiction? And what I mean is that when we were working with Rachel's Tears, we kept hearing repeated reports of children being taken off of school premises, always Friday afternoon, parents rushing to the courthouse, finding it closed, having to wait till Monday morning. 72 hours was gone mail for the case.
When they took my 6 kids in 1989, DHS took my kids. No, they took them out of a hospital. Out of a hospital. My 2-year-old son had got in a garage with the babysitter while I was at work, and he had spilt some gasoline on himself. So I had a lawnmower out there, lawn equipment, chainsaws, little gas cans, and he had spilt some gas on himself. That door, by the way, was between my kitchen and my garage with a couple steps down. That house that I lived in at that time, the laundry room was literally in the garage, off to one side. So she had gone in there to do some laundry and left the door open. I knew she had to go in there and do laundry. I installed a deadbolt on that door. The door had a glass window in it, and I put a sign on the window that says, keep this door locked at all times. So I did my part, and I went to work. Had to work for a living. Come home, Friday night, little sign says, your son Christopher got in the garage, he spilled some gas on himself, I'm not sure if he drank any, so we rushed him to the hospital. So I drive 100 miles an hour across town to the hospital. I get over there, I walk in, I start inquiring about my kids, and I'm noticing that the gal I'm talking to is kind of looking over my shoulder every once in a while. So I turn around and there's 2 police officers standing behind me. So I walk over and said, hey, I need your help. I'm trying to find my kids. She doesn't give me any information. I want to know where my kids are at. And as I'm talking to them, I look over their shoulder out the front windows of the hospital, and I see I'm watching my kids being loaded in a white van. So I pushed them out of the way, and I went chasing the van through the parking lot. Of course, I couldn't catch them. But that's exactly what happened. They can take them from anywhere because the state, claims to be the parent. So I have a 1-page document that I tell people to tape 4 or 5 copies on the backside of their door at their house. And if a cop shows up or a CPS agent shows up, they can tear one off, hand it to them through the door, lock the door deadbolt behind them, let them read it, and then they'll leave. Okay? But we should also have them in our car. We should take them to the school for day one, hand one to the school nurse, hand one to the superintendent, hand one to the principal, hand one to every one of their teachers, and put those people on notice. No one talks to your children, ever. They don't talk to your children unless it's to educate them. But for no governmental reason, no authority reason, are they to even talk to your children. The only thing they're supposed to be there to do is teach them English and math, in my opinion. Not very well. They shouldn't even be there. Yeah. Well, they shouldn't even be there, okay? It's our responsibility, and they've been lax in it, and they're not doing a good job. So that brings up a great point. I'm going to talk for just a minute. In 1951, they paraded, if you could picture in your mind a school teacher, the perfect school teacher, a little old lady school teacher, if you could close your eyes and say, this is the sweetest lady who knows everything, who could teach my kids, that picture in your mind would be Jane Spalding. Jane Spalding. The United States government paraded her around to all 50 states between 1951 and 1953, educating the states and selling them on standardized education. So that a student going to school in Los Angeles, if their parents moved to New York in the middle of the school year, they could move over there and fit right in, right, same curriculum, same testing, same everything. But it was also on the auspice that the schools would get federal money, right? Before that, it was state-run schools. So the idea was that when all the states signed on to this, Jane Spalding would be the head of the Department of Education for the United States government. And as this perfect school teacher, she would make sure your children were getting the best education possible. And she truly was perfect. On April 11th, 1953, the 50th state signed on to the program. And Jane Spalding became the head of the Department of Education. 49 days later, the President of the United States at that time fired her and put Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller in as the head of the Department of Education. At his acceptance speech, which was a very famous speech, there were a room full of reporters, cameramen, and they asked him some questions. One was, Nelson, how much money did you make last year? He said $140 million, 1953. He was a grandson of one of the most prominent banking families in the world. He made $140 million. They said, how much did you pay in taxes? And he reached in his pocket and he grabbed out a penny, which at that time they were Indian head pennies, and he flicked it into the audience and he says, not one red cent. Now today he would have been hammered for that being a racist statement, right? Not one red cent. And that line became famous. And they said, Nelson, if you made $140 million last year, why would you take this position? It only paid at that time, I think it was $37,000 or something, a yearly salary, as the head of the Department of Education. $37,000 was a lot of money in that time. Okay, the average house was about $2,500 bucks. Okay, and he said, because I consider it the most important position in all of government. Hands went up, flashbulbs went off. They said, you mean you consider it a greater position than the President and the Vice President of the United States? And he looks at him and says, absolutely I do. Because if you give me one decade, one generation, and I'll change the minds and therefore the direction of the world. I'll change the minds and therefore the direction of the world. And he did. 8 years later, not even a decade, 8 years later, every textbook in our schools were changed to lies. Now that wasn't the first revision. Go back to 1908 when the Jekyll Island and the Federal Reserve started to come into play, and things started changing back then. They changed at that time as well. Our textbooks changed on state level, state by state. They all changed. I had an argument with a 20-year professor of history that went on about 3 months. I mean, we were going back and forth on the phone, on emails, on text messages. He had watched one of my videos. Now, it wasn't just about him. It was more about Abe Lincoln. But he had watched one of my videos where I just hammered old Abe. And he called me up and he said, David, I think you're not telling the truth here. I think you're telling lies. And I said, oh, really? Explain that to me. And I challenged him. And there's not many people that can out-debate me. Okay? And he started talking about things. And I said, well, where did you get your information? He says, well, out of the textbooks. I've been teaching for 25 years. Well, I said, great. Do you have any textbooks that are, say, prior to the turn of the century, 1900 and before? And he said, no. I said, go see if you can find any. A couple weeks went by, sent him a little text. Hey, did you find any of those textbooks yet? No, I can't find any anywhere. I said, keep looking. A couple weeks go by. Hey, have you found any of those textbooks yet? Nope. This went on for 3 months. Finally, he says, I had to go back, and I forgot where it was, Connecticut or somewhere back in the Northeast, to a family reunion. And I was walking down the street, and there was a garage sale, and there was a box of books there, and it was a whole bunch of really old books. And I found 2 history textbooks, one from before 1900 and one from like 1902, 1903, somewhere in there. And I said, well, what did you learn? He says, I learned that everything I've been teaching for 25 years is a lie. Yeah. He was devastated. This man, I mean, he needed counseling by the time he was done. Just devastated. I mean, he was ready to retire after just finding those 2 textbooks. And anyway, the only way to learn true history is to get it from the horse's mouth. Read letters and journals of people who lived during the time, and what did they think? What did they write to their grandmother and their neighbor, and had the conversations they carried on about old Abe Lincoln? Read some of the letters that were written in Illinois in the 1850s, and you'll get a whole new picture of the man. Okay, and it's not just him. I'm just using him as an example. History is rewritten by the victor. And when Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller became the victor, he rewrote history. And guess who that affected? Me. I wasn't born until 63. He had already had this decade in place between 53 and 63 to change everything. So when I went into school, everything I learned kindergarten through 12th grade was a lie, pretty much. Yeah. Fortunately, I had a mother that got me interested in things like history and genealogy, and she really taught me how to read and how to study and how to learn. But reading is not reading. She also taught me it's comprehending. It's searching. That they're only going to put something in one little place over here, and then the next piece of the puzzle is going to be over here. and the next piece of the puzzle is going to be over here. And you got to find those puzzle pieces. What is the key in this one set of laws? What's that one key that shows you a piece of the puzzle? What is that one key over in this piece of law that shows you the puzzle? Or in this book that shows you the puzzle? I suggest reading The Law of Nations by Vattel. That's how our country was founded. Read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers. That's the arguments that they had at the conventions before the Declaration of Independence was written. Do you guys know what the Declaration of Independence says? It's probably the most important document we have. There's also the Magna Carta from 1215. That was one of the most important documents, because everything that happens in England a few hundred years before it happens here, but that's one of the most important documents that helps us to be free. Okay? Then read Judge Napolitano. He says the constitutions usurp the Articles of Confederation. Somebody asked me this at lunch, and I said I'd talk about it tomorrow, so I'm going to bring it up. With Lincoln, what happened? What happened with Lincoln? First of all, when he finally did, because of the bankers' money, win the presidency, he couldn't be president. Did you know that? He was a bar member. We had other attorneys that were presidents prior to that, but he was the first bar association president. He couldn't be, because he held a title of nobility, he couldn't be president. See, the 13th Tona Amendment was put in the first Constitution, which, by the way, one of my grandfathers, Richard Straight, signed that first Constitution. And it had that 13th Tona Amendment, saying that it's called, I call it Tona because it's Titles of Nobility Act. No one holding a title of nobility, no prince, king, queen, esquire, which is a bar member, could hold the office of the president. So what did he do when he became president? He bankrupted the original United States of America, and he incorporated it as a Delaware corporation. And then he put the Grand Army of the Republic in charge of the country. And then he made himself the commander-in-chief. He signed Executive Order Number 1. He was the first president in history to sign an executive order. Within 30 days, he signed Executive Order Number 100. 100 executive orders in his first 30 days in office. Executive Order 100 was the Lieber Code. It put the country under martial rule, and it's never been rescinded. This is why we've been flying the war flag ever since. We've been under war. And by the way, women, the Lieber Code says they're not supposed to attack women or children. So if you use the Lieber Code in court as a woman, things ought to go a lot easier on you. If you can find a judge that cares about that anymore. So, Lincoln did a lot of things that started us on this path of corruption. So who was the hero? Was it Booth? Was he the patriot?
No, all that.
I mean, you got to understand who played the right part. History was written by the victor. So they just twisted the story. They flipped it on its head. Do I like talking bad about any of our presidents? No, I don't. How many presidents did we have prior to George Washington? If you know, don't answer. Because I knew you were going to throw that. You're close. We had 14 presidents prior to George Washington. This country was founded in 1607 in Jamestown, Virginia, 1620 in Massachusetts. It wasn't until 1776 that the Declaration of Independence was written. The United States of America started in 1776. What were we prior to 1776? Well, between 1607 and 1620, in the South, we were under the Virginia Delegate, the Virginia Compact. What were we in Massachusetts? We were under the Mayflower Compact starting in 1620. They arrived in Mayflower in the Boston Harbor in November in Boston. You know how cold it is in November in Boston? And they arrived. And they said, we're not leaving